Hello friends, Ashton here. So in today's live coding project, I'm going to show you a interesting project, but it's quite small, and it involves a lot of API like the calendar. So basically, what I'm doing here in this project is to create some event for the tide in your location. Okay, so here is the example. I have created the high tide event in the morning, and this is low tide and high tide, low tide. So I created for about a week. Okay, so we can have this script to run every week. So every Monday or every Sunday, you can generate the tide event for the next week. Okay, since this project going to involve the API. Okay, so you're going to fetch data from the API service like the worldtide API. So this API provides the weather information and the tide information we can use. All right, and we get the data from the API. So and we need to use this data from the API, and we create this event in our Google Calendar like this. Okay, so you can follow this video and you can build this project, and after you check all of them, and you should be able to do some modification and change it for yourself. So we can get started. Okay, so first of all, let's just create the project, and for this project I'd like to use Google Sheet for the project. Okay, maybe we need to save some data in this spreadsheet if you want. Okay, so first of all, let me rename this file to live coding 014, and it's worldwide, not worldwide, worldtides notification. And after we have this created, let's go to the app script to initialize the script file. Okay, it's still working. App script. I think it's still initialize this new file, and it's going to take a while. All right. So maybe we can use this. So sometimes you want to separate the script project with the Google Sheet. If you don't want the users to see your script, you can keep it separate. So open this app script, and we can start with the project. Okay. So so I'd like to rename this project to live coding 014. Alright, so first step here in our project file, I need to have a function to connect to the worldtides API. Okay, so then we can retrieve the data from their API. So to do that, basically I'd like to add settings here as usual. You can call it configurations or something like that. So first we need to have an API key. Okay, and we also is going to use API endpoint. All of this information can be retrieved from our the website from worldtide. So if you search for worldtides, it should bring you to this website. Okay, and here for this example, I'm using a free. If you check the pricing, okay, I'm using the free plan. And if you want to use this, if you want to do the query very heavily every day, you may need to have a paid account. Okay, so here as you can see, here is the about the pricing. Okay, and first of all, you need to have an account. Okay, you need to register and get the account. So for me, I already have an account. I just need to log in. I think I already logged in. So here I can check the API key in these settings. So let's grab this API key. And I think I'm going to reset this API key after this course, okay? So it's better for you to create an account and use your own API key. So this is the API key. I just copied and paste here. And for the endpoint, I need to go to the API docs. Okay, I go to the documentations. I'm going to grab the endpoint. So this is about the API document here, and this is going to be our endpoint. So you can use, I think you can use either of them. So let's try this one. So this is endpoint, and this is the API key. So for now, I think we almost have everything here, but we need to use a function to build the API. Okay, so let's say we can create a function to build API. Not build the API, because right now we have the endpoint and we have the API key, but we need to pass some parameters. Like if you check here in these parameters, we need to pass, okay, a start date. Actually, this is going to be the start date, and we need to pass how many days we want to query the data from the backend, right? And we want to get the extremes. So basically, this is going to be have a high tide and a low tide for every day. Okay. So what we need to do, we need to have the date parameter, right? So we let pass this as an object. So we're going to have a date, and we are going to have how many days we're going to pass, and we're going to have a latitude, that is LAT, and another very important query parameters is this longitude. All right. So this basically is the location you want to check, right? So, and anything else? I'm going to use this date for this start, and then we're going to assign this as days. And also, we also need to use something called step, or the length, or the step. So this is the step. Going to pass it here, and I think I added it here. So the date is going to be the start date, and this day is going to be the range. Okay, how many days you want to query, and this is the location, which is going to be the latitude and longitude for this API call. Okay, so were we anything else? I think that's it. That all of them I need. Okay. About this step, where is the step? Step size in second. By default, the step is half hour. Okay. So we can make it 1 hour if you like. And so you can pass these parameters. Basically, they're in second. Okay. So after we got all of this data, we can return this as a full API. Okay. So we pass the settings endpoint, right? And we query the first parameter here is going to be the and it doesn't matter. Okay, so we can pass the API key. So we put the key here, So the key is going to be the settings dot API. Right, and we're going to connect the date, so equal to the date, and we're going to have the days equal to days, and the step is going to be the step, and latitude is going to be the latitude. So, and the longitude is going to be the longitude. Make sure there is no typo, okay? So in this function is going to build our API, okay? So I'd like to create a function to test it. So let's make sure this is working. So API equal to this. I'm going to log it out, and we can try to test it in our browser. I'm going to return this API, okay? So I need to remove this underscore, or cannot see this function here in this drop-down list. So it's selected, and let me try to run this function. I'm sorry, I cannot do that because right now they're undefined. So I basically need to make let's do a test function. All right. So function test. Let's make a test function, and let's say const API equal to build API. So we pass the date is going to be new date. So right now is the time, and the date is going to be days. Let's say 7 days for a week, and the step is going to be so 1 hour is going to be 60, right? Which makes it 3 like this, and the longitude is going to be the so we can open the Google Maps. So maps. So you can pick anywhere in the world, right? So let's say I'd like to check a place in maybe Tokyo, around Tokyo. So let's try this one. So basically, if you right click, you get, as you can see, this is latitude and longitude here. So you can make a copy of that, and let's say but we need to pass this as an object, date, days, and this is going to be our step, and the latitude and the longitude, and I'm going to log this out. So we can try to run this test function, and we got so this date is issue, okay? We cannot use this format, and we need to transfer. We need to format it as so to ISO string, and we're going to further slice the first 10 digits. Okay, it's going to be a format like year, and month, day. Okay, in this format, it's going to be the ISO string format for the date. So let's try to do this test again. All right, so we got this link, and let me make a copy of it, and let me open it in the browser. Station is hide. Okay. I forget one thing. So I need to pass the most important. So we are going to extract, going to put the data for the tide, right? So we need to pass the extremes here. So if you check the API here, we have this. This is what we want, okay? So it's going to retrieve the data for us. So basically, let me do this test again, and we can make a copy of this and try to use it here. So right now, as you can see, this is going to be this station, and this is going to be the extremes. So as you can see here, we have the tide, low, and high, and the date information here we can get from the API. Okay, so we are going to use this data. Okay, we have the date and we have this information. I'm going to create an event. So basically, create an event in your Google Calendar and send an event notification like that, so you can have a reminder or something like that. And also you can share this with others. You can invite other people to your calendar to this event, so they know when the low tide in the day and the high tide in the day. All right. So this is the data. So I keep it here. Just maybe we are going to use it later. So basically, right now, let me get rid of this. No, I keep it here for test right now. So we have this API built successfully, and our next step, we're going to try to design another function or define another function to pull the data, okay, from this URL. And I'd like to save this data to this Google Sheet. And because I'm using the free plan, okay, so maybe I need to save this data to the cache to save some quota, because for free account I only have about 100 request. I can use 100 credits per month, I think. So if the credit is not is consumed, I cannot use this API anymore for free. Okay, so let's first do the API call in our project. Okay, so I'd like to create a function to do this API call, so we can get the data from this URL. We just tested in the browser. Okay, so I'd like to call it get tides. All right, so here I'd like to define maybe, so for now I'd like to use at least we need to have some parameters. As you can see, we need to have the date and how many days and the step. So all of this I'd like to make it in these settings, so you can configure it if you want. Okay, so the date and the days, how many days, so I'd like to say days, so I'd like to make it 7 days for a week. And for this step, what I used here is 1 hour, and the latitude, for now I keep it like this, so you can change it if you want. And this is for the longitude. I copy this value and put it here. So this is about all of this, and this date, this is very flexible, so I'm not sure. I assume we'd like to use the current time, date and time. Okay, so if we are trying to run this function right now, that means I'm going to run this right now. Okay, because so basically at last we're going to have a trigger to run this function, so we don't need to run it manually. So maybe so 1 week we run this function every week. Okay, so I keep this date as current date, Okay, so this is the plan. And here for this get height, so we get the date, right? And we can say API data equal to, we're going to have the date. The date is going to be new date. So get to ISO string and the slice. So basically the first 10 digit of the date format of the string date. So we have the date, and days is going to be settings, days, and we're going to use this tab. It's going to be settings step, and latitude is going to be settings, latitude, and the longitude is going to be the settings, longitude. So this is very similar to what we are testing here, right? Is that which actually is the same. And so we have the API data, and you can say the parameters, parameters, something like that, perms, and let's get the API. So the API is going to be, we have a function to build the API, right? So we only pass the parameters, and it's going to create this API for us. So after we have this API, what we can do here, we can send a request to this API, right? So to do that, we need to use this URL fetch API. So URL fetch, I'm going to fetch the data, and then we pass the API. So by default, this function is going to use a get method to get the data from this API, right? So let's do const response equal to, so we get the response from this fetch call, okay? And after we fetch the data from this API, what we can do here, so if you remember, this is the data we get from the backend, from the API service, okay? From the server, and we get the data. And the most important stuff we need to use, we need to get these extremes. So let's const extremes. So IP structure this, or maybe we can do something like const data equal to response, and we can get the content text, because this response from the API is going to be basically we get the content as a text. That means string file JSON object. So we can parse it with this JSON API, and we parse the content, and we get a data object like this. So this data object is going to be this object you see here, not this one, but similar to this one. The data structure is like this, okay? So we can get these extremes. So for these extremes, I'd like to rename it to, so let's const tides to data.extremes. All right, so this is the tides we get from here. So after we get these tides, I like to do two things, okay? So first, I'd like to save this to cache. So because every time you run this function, it's going to call this API. But we are using a free account, a free plan. So basically, I don't want to consume a lot of my credits. So I'd like to save the data to our cache, and we can use it later if we like. And at the same time, I also want to save it to this tab, to this Google Sheet. Okay, just in case. All right, so let's do the cache part first. Okay, so to cache the data, I'd like to create another function to cache the data. So function cache cache tides. I'm going to pass the tides here, right? And what we can do here is going to be very simple. So let's get the cache service first. So let's say cache is equal to, we have the cache service API, and we can get the script cache. So this is going to be our cache service. So cache, we can put, as you can see, this function is going to take a key and a value, and I'd like to define the key here. So let's say cache key. So the cache key is going to be, so any name you like, okay, let's say tides. And so we have this settings dot cache key, and we need to pass the values. So since the value is going to be a string, but this type is an object, if you can check, this is an array of objects. So I like to parse it, or stringify it, not parse it. So I stringify this type, is right? So this is going to be the value. But another parameter here, I'd like to set the expiration time for this cache. So by default, I think, I don't remember by default, but I'd like to keep it as long as possible. So not sure, I think the longest time is 6 hours. Yes, the maximum is, this is the maximum seconds, is 6 hours. So let's just put this value here. So that's it for this cache. It's quite simple, but I like to keep it separate in another function just in case, to make it easier for you to understand it. So I have this function created, and I'd like to cache the tides, right? I pass the tides here. So this is about how to cache it. And after we cache the data, so to get the tides, how can we use this cache? So every time we get the tide, I'd like to have a parameter here. I like to say use cache. By default, I set it to true. So I prefer to use cache. So if use cache, not like this. So let's say let tides equal to, sorry. So const cache equal to cache service. Let's get the script cache. So make sure you're using the same cache service, okay? Make sure, or you cannot find it. So this is our cache service, and let tides equal to, or we can say tide cache, just say tides, okay, cache, and we can get the cache from our cache service, and the key we define in the settings, right? So if we find the tides in the cache, and we can set this, we can parse it, because we save it as a string, right? So we parse it, and what we can do here, okay, you see this error because here we have we define these tides again, so I don't need this const anymore. So we parse it, and we just return the tides, right? We don't need to do anything, because if tides end, we use cache, because we have this parameter here. Just in case you want to refresh data not using the cache, so you can pass this parameter as a false, and this block of code is going to be ignored because this use cache is false. So by default is true. So if we have the tides in the cache and this use cache flag is true, and then we basically not send the API code to our API service, and we use the data in the cache, and we return the tides. So this is going to save our credit. All right. So this is how we can handle this cache. And our next step is going to be save the data to the Google Sheet. Okay, so after we save the data to our cache, I'd like to make another function to save the tides to a sheet. So I'm going to create this function, and I'm going to pass these tides here. So this function, let's define here after this cache tides. So tides. So we're going to need a sheet name here for the tiles. Okay, so let's name it tiles. So this is going to be the name, right? The name of the sheet. So const spreadsheet is going to be spreadsheet.get active, and to get the worksheet, it's const worksheet equal to get sheet by name. So the name is going to be settings sheet name, and if we cannot find this worksheet, I'm going to create a new one, right? I'm going to insert sheet with name. So settings.sheet name. So this is going to make sure we're going to have a tab like this, and we need to get the values from these tiles. Okay, so if you check the type, the type is going to be this extremes, right? It's actually an array, and but in this array is an object. So our target is to translate or convert this object to an array. So I think that data we need here is the date and this height and this type. So what we can do here, so let's say const values is going to be the tiles map one, because this is array, right? And we're going to destructure this tile object, and we get the date, and also I'd like to get the type and the height, so we can translate basically convert this object to array. So we put the date at the first place, first column, and type and height, and I'd like to add a header to these values. So values unshift. So this unshift function is going to insert an element at the first position in this array. Okay, so the header is going to be the date and the type and the height, and I'd like to convert this date to a date into a date type. Okay, so make it a date. So this function is going to save our tiles data to the Google Sheet if there is no issues here. So I forgot something. So we have the values and we have the worksheet. So what we can do here, first of all, I'd like to clear the data just in case we already have some data in this worksheet. And worksheet.getRange, start from row 1, column 1, number of rows is going to be the values.length, and number of columns is going to be the values, the first one, and the length, basically the length of the header. And I'm going to set the values and values. Right, so this function is going to be called here, and also I'd like to call this function as well when we are using the types in the cache, just in case you change some data here. All right, so I think we can try to run this function now. So So maybe we can try it in this test function. So we can get rid of this, and we can try to run this function. Let's say get tides. So use cache true, or we can make it true. So let's try to run this test function. Okay, because we are using some selector account, we add a lot of APIs here, like the cache service and the URL fetch API. So this is the URL fetch API, and it's Google Spreadsheet API. Okay. I hope I didn't do anything wrong, and it seems like it's working. And if I check, so as you can see here, this is the date started, and then we get 3. Why 3? I think I should have 4. I don't know. It's weird. Maybe it's about this step. I don't know. So let's just check if this is true. Because every day I should have 4. I should have 4 because we have a high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide every day. So this value is not very, it's weird, but as you can see here, we have the data here. Okay, so maybe it's because we didn't start from the current time. Okay, so the time, so maybe I'd like to set, let me check. So right now, if I try to run this function again, I'm using the data from the cache. So to verify it, to make sure this data is from the cache, so I'd like to console.log this tile is here. All right, so make sure I'm using the data in the cache. So let's try to test it. So as you can see, the data is not from the API, it's from the cache, and we got the data. And the new date, I think it's because this date, we have a start date, we have a start time, right? So I just keep it like this, and we can move on to the event creation in your Google Calendar. Okay, so right now we have this data for the tide in our, basically in our Google Sheet and in our cache, right? And we can use this data to create an event, or not one event, all of this event. We can build this event for this time and create an event in your Google Calendar. So let's do this. And I'd like to put this function here below and collapse some functions here. So to do that, I'd like to create a function to create event or tide event. So I'm going to take a tide as object. In this tide, we're going to have the date, right, and type and height. So this is the information we need, I'd like to use. So we are going to have a start. This date is going to be our start date or start time. So const start time is going to be the date, and or new date. So this is going to be our start time. But for the event, we need to have an end time. So const end time and new date. I'm going to have this new date and start time, get time. So the end date is like about 1 hour after this start date, so we can use 60 minutes by 60 minutes and plus 1000 multiply 1000, I'm sorry. So this is going to be 1 hour, right? And I think you can define the variable here called event time. So let's say by default it's 60 minutes. So we can use this as a parameter here. So settings event time. Okay, so this is in minutes. And make it easier for you to input here. So you can make it 30 minutes or 15 minutes if you like. So here we're going to use this event time and multiply 16. It's going to convert it to second and convert it to millisecond. So this is going to be our end time for the event. And anything else? I need to have a title, okay, for the event. So the title, we can do something like so the type of the tide. So this type could be a height or low, right? High tide, low tide, something like that. And we can put the actually the height here for this tide. So you can add more stuff here if you like, okay? So I'm going to keep it simple like this. So we can create the event very easily. So calendar, create event. We're going to have the title as the first parameter, as you can see, and start time and end time. So this is going to create an event. And before we create event, I'd like to check if this event is already created, because I don't want to create a duplicate event here, right? So to do that, I'd like to check. So let's get the event from this time range. So event equal to calendar app. Let's get events. So it's take start time and end time. So let's say const find event equal to event. This is wrong. I'm going to find so event.title. So I'm going to get the title and compare this title with the title with this title. Okay. So basically, if the title we find a title title of the event is the same with this title, I assume this event is already created and we don't need to recreate it again. Okay. So basically, if you find, and I'm going to return here, and this line of code going to be ignored. Okay, so this is basically going to check if the event is already created or not. Okay, so after we create it, I'd like to set a color for the high tide and the low tide. All right, so set color. So if the type is equal to high, and I'd like to assign a color. So settings, high color, maybe, which right now is not defined, and the settings, low color. So you can choose the color you prefer. So I put it here, so you can configure it here. Let's say high color. So you can use the calendar app event color to pick a color from here. All right. So for high color, I'd like to change it to a pale red. and low color, calendar app, event color, and for the low color, which color you prefer to use? Let's say yellow maybe. Let's try yellow. So this is for the color for event color. Okay, we have the low color. This is low color, and we have this high color, not high color. Okay, so I think this function is going to create the event, create a one single event. Okay, so our final function here is going to be the trigger function. So function create tide events, and when we call this function, we call it manually, or we use a trigger to call this function. So first of all, I like to get the tides, right? So the tide is going to be this function. We have a function get tides, so I'm put underscore here for the get tides. Where is my function get tides? And by default, it's going to use the cache. And another, so after we get the tides, this tide is going to be array of tide, right? So tides dot for each, not for color. What do we return here for these tides? So we need to return, okay, we need to return the tides here. Tides. Because here if we are using the cache, we return the tides here. If we are not using the cache, we also need to return these tides. Okay, so this tide is going to be for each. So for each tide, and we call this function create event, create a tide event, and we pass this tide. We pass this tide as a parameter here because we have the date type height in this object. So this is the object I'm talking about, right? So this function, so if I try to run this function right now, I think I should have the event created. So let me just open my calendar. To test it. So right now I'm in January, February. So I should have the event created from this date. So let's pick a weekly view. And let me get rid of this one. This not this month. So February. Okay, so this right now I don't have any event here. All right. Let's try to test it. Create tides. Okay, new APIs. Advanced. So we are using the calendar API. So let's check. Okay, we have this logged out. I didn't remove the log. So this log, and as you can see, it's loading and it's creating the event. So if I check my calendar, so as you can see here, we have this tides here. But I don't know why this is pretty weird. So like this one, if I pick a day view, and for this one, it looks like a little bit better. So this is the high tide, and this is the low tide, and this high tide, and this is the low tide. Maybe I need to change some parameters. Not sure. Let me check in this credit calculator. So maybe the samples per hour, maybe change it to 1, 2. This is the length. So I change it for 7 days like that. Credit samples per hour 1. That's weird. So if I change this to 7 days to 14 days, and I'd like to use another function. So if I change something here, I want to I don't want to use the cache, and I need to pass this to false to make sure this is working. So I tried to create it again. I hope I can get more data here for 2 weeks. And if you have too many events to be created, I think it's going to be a problem because this create event API, if you call this API too many times in a short time, it's going to throw you an error. Okay, so I suggest you to set these days as short as possible. So maybe 1 week or 2 weeks is going to be fine. So if you set it to a month, I think it's going to cause you some problem. Okay. So if I check my calendar, change it to month view. So okay, I totally lost. April, March, February. No. So as you can see here, this is they are all created successfully. Sometimes I don't know why. Maybe it's related to the API. There is a 3 tide event. So normally you should have 4. Okay, like this. So change it to weekly view. So like this. Okay. So I think that's almost it about this project. And maybe if one final thing is about the trigger, right? So we have this function, and I need to remove this false. So you can set a trigger to create this function since we have this set up as 14 days. So you can set up a trigger. Let me check if I can set a trigger to run every 14 days. So let's add a new trigger. Create this function, and time-based, I think. Time-driven, hourly, weekly. So you can select a date. So here I don't have the option for bi-weekly. I only have weekly, day, month, specific time and date. I'm not sure. So I think we need to do it weekly, okay? Because we don't have an option to run this bi-weekly. So every Monday or every Sunday, if you prefer. So midnight, 1 to a.m. should be fine. All right, so let's save it. And this is going to call this function every week on Monday. okay? And you don't need to do anything, but you need to change this to 7 days. All right. And I'd like to create another function here to help you to delete the functions, not the functions, delete the events, just in case you need to run some test and you create a lot of events in your calendar and don't know how to remove them. It's going to be a headache if you want to delete them one by one, okay? So let's do this function. So to delete the event, it's going to be a very easy function to do. Let's say delete tide events. And you need to have a start time and the end time, just like we did here. So let's const start time equal to start time equal to new date. So here you can put, so you can go to your calendar and you check. So basically you can go to have a start date and end date for the event you'd like to check. So for me, if I change it to month view, I think we start from here, 24, right? And we end it 9th of March. So 24, I change it to 23. And for the end time, this is going to be March and 10. So you can have you can extend this time zone, time range, not a big deal. So let's say const event equal to, not event, events equal to calendar app. So I'm going to get all of this event from this time range, right? We're going to have a start time and the end time, and event for each event. So if event, let's get the title, okay? Const title equal to event get title. So remember, when we create the event, we use this type tide. So this is the keyword. We're going to try to check if this event is a event for the tide. So if title starts with, it could be high tide, or it start from low tide. We only have two possibilities, right? And it's going to, if this is either a high tide or low tide event, I'm going to delete it. So this function is going to help us to delete the event. So this is only for it's just a helper function for you to test, okay? So let's try to test it. So delete the events. I hope I can. So after we did this, we want to make sure we didn't delete any event. You don't want to delete them. So let's try to reload. So I have a fully clean calendar. Okay, so be very careful before you use this function. Okay, I don't want to delete a very important event from your calendar, all right? So be very careful when you are trying to use this function. All right, so this is about the helper function to get the event. And the last thing I'd like to do in this project, I'd like to create another helper function to get the latitude and longitude for a location or for an address, because maybe for some of you this is not easy for you to get because you need to go to a Google Map or something, some web application to get this data. So I'd like you to enter an address so we can get this latitude and longitude for that address. All right. So let's do that part. So to get the latitude and longitude for address, we need to use the Google Maps API. Okay, so where can I create this function? So I'd like to create it here after this build API. So function get, I name it get location, and I need to address for the parameter. So this is going to be the address. So let's say I go to this Google Drive, not Google Drive, Google Map, and let's say this time I'd like to pick another place. Maybe I'd like to go to Bangkok, but I cannot because of the COVID. That's a pity. So I go to Bangkok. I cannot pick. So I'd like to pick this Bangkok, Thailand as the address. And I put it here. Okay. This is going to be the address. And by default, this address is going to be the settings address. Okay. So what we can do here, let's const. We need to use the maps API, okay? And we're going to create a new geocoder, and we're going to set the geocode. So this code can take the address, as you can see. So address, and we can get the response from this geocoder. All right. So first of all, let's just console log this response, and let's check what we can get. I know what we can get here, okay? But just to show you how, if you want to explore this API, so you can try it here like this. So first of all, let's try to run this function here in this test function, because we have an underscore here and we cannot see this function here, but you can use it in this test function. And as you can see here, we have this status and the result. So let's get the status and the result. So let's destructure the status and the result from this response, right? And we can say if status is equal to OK, just in case you put an address we cannot find, maybe not on the earth, I don't know. So this result is going to be the, so let's say location is going to be the first one, right? We may have several locations with this address. Maybe the name you input is not very, I don't know, maybe you have two places in the world we have the same name, Bangkok, Thailand, something like that. So this is going to be our location. So let's check what we can get from this location object. We can explore this step by step. And so in this address, and you have several data you can use, all right? But the most important stuff we'd like to use is this geometry location. So geometry location, and we have the latitude and longitude. So this is, remember this is LNG, but in our code we have this LON. So it's just a little bit definition for this latitude and longitude. So we can get the const we can say this is going to from the geometry location, right? So this is our location, and we can return an object like longitude, latitude as a location, latitude, and long and location dot lng. All right, so let's make it a variable in a variable. So let's say this is going to be our coordinates. I don't know how to spell it. Coordinates. So this is the coordinates, and we just try to test it and then console it, log it out. Okay, and try to run this test function again. Okay, so latitude, longitude is successfully get this data, and you can verify this with Google Map. So if I right click, copy this value, and 13, right, 100. So 13, 100 is almost the same. I think they're very close. So it should be very good enough, accurate enough for us to use, right? And then we can return these coordinates. And this is going to be our function to get the location. And after we have this function, we don't need to use this variable here anymore, but we need to replace the function here in our, I think where I can find it, in our getTides function, because we pass this latitude, longitude here. So here, first of all, here I'd like to get the const latitude and the longitude is equal to get locations, right? As the address by default is going to be this address you defined it here. So we have this latitude, and then we can replace it with this latitude and longitude, this longitude. So since this key and the value are the same, so we can just remove it like this. So I think this should work too. So let me try to run the final test for Thailand, not for Bangkok. So we can get rid of this. For Thailand, where is my... So false. I don't want to use the cache, so I make it false, and I can test it. So create tide events. So this time we should create the tide event for Thailand. And if you like, I think you can put the Thailand in this title, right? Maybe you can say address. So just an idea for you. Not sure if it's done. And let me check my calendar. So right now it's done. Calendar. Today. So as you can see here, I got a full, yes, this is a week of the tide event for Thailand, for Bangkok. So if I change it to week view, it's like this, something like this. All right, so yeah, I think that's it for this video, and I hope you can learn something, because we use it several APIs like the Google Maps API, Calendar API, Google Sheet API, and the URL fetch API in this project. As you can see, not a lot of code, but you can get the idea and how to utilize this app script. It's quite powerful. Okay, so you can basically use it to automate the boring stuff in your daily life. Alright, so that's it for this video, and thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.
I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays. Way back a year ago.